Hey, everybody. Welcome to Resiliency Radio, your go-to podcast for the most cutting-edge insights in integrative and functional medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Jill, and with each episode, we dive into the heart of healing and personal transformation. Join us as we interview renowned world experts, medical leaders, thought leaders, and all kinds of interesting folks. I know that I learn along with you each week. This week, I'm super excited to talk about brain retraining, and I'll introduce our guest in just a moment. It's powerful information that could help transform your chronic illness from the inside out. When we think differently and when we feel safe in our bodies, it has a profound effect on our immune system. So stay tuned. I promise you this information will be worth your time. Before we do, though, I want to share with you just a couple things. First of all, I know a lot of you listen and listen weekly to my show and haven't yet subscribed or tuned in. If you are on YouTube, will you please hit that subscribe button and help us reach more people? You can also hit the bell to be notified of new episodes. They come out every week with new guests. So would love to have that from you if you enjoy the show. Also, please feel free to comment, share with me what you like, any questions you have. I actually personally go in here and answer the comments and questions on YouTube. And if you're on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else that you might be listening to this podcast, would you stop by and leave us a review? That would be so helpful. We really, really appreciate your feedback. Okay, last thing is if you have not been over to my new website, drjillbeauty.com. We have a ton of new anti-aging products, vitamin C serums, peptide creams, pretty much anything you would want to lighten, brighten your skin in a healthy, natural way. What I've found is that so many of the products out there either work, their prescription strength, and they have toxic chemicals like parabens and phthalates. Can't use that on your skin because you're just adding to the toxic load. Or there are these wonderful blends of essential oils and things that could almost be edible, but they just don't work like the anti-aging. So I set out to create a line. It's called Dr. Jill Beauty. You can find it at drjillbeauty.com of stuff that I use. I use it every single day. My favorites are the Biopeptide Beauty Cream, the HA Collagen Serum, and the Vita CE Serum. Those are my favorites packs. If you're not sure where to start, that's a great place to start. But go over there, check it out, leave me some feedback, drjillbeauty.com. Okay, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest. Our guest is Ashok Gupta. He's an internationally renowned speaker, filmmaker, and health practitioner. He has dedicated his life to supporting people through chronic illness and achieving their potential. He suffered from chronic fatigue, as we'll hear in the interview today, around 25 years old when he was studying at Cambridge University. And then he was on his own journey through neurological research to create a program to start to heal himself. And he did that through brain retraining, which we're going to talk about today. It's really another way to talk about neuroplasticity and how we interact with our somatic system. So you're going to learn all the tips and tricks that he has learned over these years, and lots of free access to different trainings and tips and what he calls Gupta size, which you can get in your inbox every day. He's published several medical papers and continually researching chronic conditions. And the great thing is a lot of this is very evidence-backed by independent research. So I think you're going to enjoy the show today. Without further ado, let me welcome Ashok Gupta. So, Ashok, according to your bio, you've had quite a story, and I always love with our guests to start with your background because so often knowing the why behind what we do actually matters. At least to me, it does, and I know to those listening. Tell us a little bit about your own journey and how did you get started into this field?
Yes, well, thank you. And like many of us, we start with our own personal journey, the challenges we've been through. So my journey started in actually the mid 90s when a lot of these conditions weren't really understood much. And I was studying as an undergrad at Cambridge and I was, living life to the full, burning the candle at both ends, probably pushing my body a little too far, but, handling it. And I had some kind of virus, and it was like a stomach bug with flu and all kinds of symptoms. And I didn't think much of it. And the symptoms seemed to go, but my illness seemed to get worse and worse. I got more and more exhausted, more and more fatigued, to the moment at which I had to crawl to the bathroom. I was almost housebound. I couldn't do anything. I'd open up a textbook and not be able to read the words on the page. And it felt like I'd been precipitated into old age. I mean, it really was unexpected and crazy. And that, as you can imagine, for a young man was like a brick wall in front of me. And so in my worst moments, I was almost suicidal, thinking, what is this? What on earth is going on in my brain and in my body? And I would go from doctor to doctor and they would say, we don't know what you have. We don't know what causes it. We don't have any treatment for it. and you might have it for the rest of your life. Goodbye. And that really was the start of my quest to understand these conditions. And I met hundreds of others, and I made a contract with the universe. And I said, if I can just get myself, even if it's 30% better, 60% better, ideally 100% well, I will dedicate the rest of my life to helping others with this condition, because untold suffering is occurring with these conditions. And so I was in a bookstore in Cambridge, and there was one book just jutting off the shelf. In the days when we used to actually have books
Yes, yes.
to research, and I don't know why it just called to me, and I picked that book off the shelf, and it was called "The Emotional Life of the Brain" by Professor Joseph Ledoux. And I read that book, and I thought, this is the answer. This is what is going on. And I put together a hypothesis. I, in an ad hoc way, retrained my brain, because neuroplasticity was in its infancy in those days. And I managed to get myself 100% well. And then I set up a clinic to treat others. And then we were the first to publish the first neuroplasticity program in 2007, the Gupta Program. So that's been my 30-year journey from my own experiences of ME and chronic fatigue syndrome right through to where we are now.
Wow, I love that so much because in your story is this intuitive idea that, maybe there's something else versus, like you said, you weren't getting answers with conventional medicine. And I think I want to highlight that because I think so many listeners can relate to that going to the doctor, going to the ER, getting kind of dismissed. Again, our system works great if you have a heart attack or a stroke or a trauma, right? But if you have chronic
Mhm.
illness, especially these mysterious infections and toxic things like mold illness or mast cell activation, a lot of what I deal with in clinical practice, many,
Mm.
many doctors just aren't really well versed. And so if the CBC, CMP, the basic blood work looks okay, the basic exam is okay, which in these cases they often are, the patient is told, oh, it's all in your head, or would you like an antidepressant, which is even more demoralizing, right? And then this happens, and then the patient starts to doubt their own self. And what I heard in your story was there was something deep inside of you that was on a quest to find an answer. And you actually owned that. And this is what I love to encourage patients to do because I'm just the guide, right? Like I will give all the information and help that I can. Same with you. But ultimately, that patient going through it has to decide. I want to get well. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to search and find the answers. And then to have that book like out on the shelf, like there's no doubt there was like
Mm.
a divine interference there somehow of like,
Oh,
hey, this is what you're
absolutely.
supposed to read. And especially in the days nowadays, neuroplasticity is on every Instagram post that you pull up and trauma and all this kind of stuff. We're much more aware, but back in those days, that wasn't common. So, how did you go from your education in Cambridge and then looking at this book and realizing this was a thing to actually creating a protocol or program that would actually work? What happened in that interim?
Really, you have to put the investment of time in one-on-one work, because there's a lot of people think, right, I've got an idea, let's go and publish a course. But actually, the one-on-one work teaches you so much. You learn a lot about the feedback, what works for patients, what doesn't work. So I worked in clinical practice one-on-one for about 10 years, 12 years, learned so much, and then put a lot of that together. And obviously, we can use it to continue to refine the Gupta program. So I think it was really understanding what works for most people most of the time. And of course, training in different modalities and seeing what else we can add into the mix. But the core of it was that brain retraining piece.
Yeah, so I want to dive in for those listening of what this is, like Gupta program. What does it mean? What does it look like? What is it? And I just want to frame this as far as one reason I had you on the show, and I'm so excited that we finally got it together between Europe and US time zones, is because I have realized in my 20 plus years of functional practice, I can do all the physiology, the biology, the organic acids, the stool, the gut, the you name it from those scientific perspectives. But if someone has a block related to feeling unsafe in their body, or not dealing with their old trauma, or having even a program that creates illness as something that helps them go through life, where their identity based on illness is actually kind of a fixed thing, they're not going to get well, right? And all these things are related to neuroplasticity. So I just want to say, as a physician, the things like your program out there are crucial to my patients' healing. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on today, because if patients don't know, or clients or listeners don't know that there's a mind body component that they have control over, that's one of the most exciting things for me because this part of healing is crucial. So let's go back to just the design. When we say neuroplasticity, let's go back to the basics. What is neuroplasticity? What did you find in your working with clients? And what today is the program like?
Yes, of course. And I like to kind of frame this question by starting with what is the reason we are here. Right? The biggest question of all, why are we here? The meaning of life. So I mean that more from a scientific perspective, but let's take that question. Why are we here? We're here because over millions of years of evolution, this brain, this nervous system, this immune system has evolved to protect us, yeah, to keep us safe. And you use that word safe. And actually, I was so enamored when you had your talk at PLMI, one of these conferences, and it was so interesting because this was a room of hardcore scientists mainly and some clinicians, and you were going through your experiences, and you're obviously a very well respected clinician. And at the end, you're like, but after all the supplements and all the diet changes and all this, actually, what it comes down to is your immune system, your emotional system, your nervous system, and jaws just dropped in the room because they weren't expecting you to say that at the end of your talk. And I really respect the fact that you were putting this out there in an audience which was very highly kind of reductionist and scientific in a lot of ways. So anyway, sorry, going back to my thing here, survival. Our body is designed for survival, yeah, and therefore, when survival is threatened, our system will always prioritize survival over well-being. Yeah. So let's take the example of those threats. So viruses, bacteria, toxins. Those are three main threats that we essentially get. And the brain receives those threats and creates the appropriate autonomic reactions. That's our nervous system reaction, and the appropriate immune reaction. And both of those systems work in harmony together to protect the system to ensure survival. But if our system is weak for whatever reason, then that system can malfunction. And we believe that that is the root cause of so many different modern illnesses, the inflammatory illnesses, the autoimmune illnesses. And I'd like to use an analogy, which I think a lot of patients find really useful to kind of frame this. So imagine, I call this the fairy tale analogy, and you may have heard it before. So imagine you are Queen Jill of your kingdom. Doesn't that have a nice ring to it? So you're Queen Jill, and your kingdom is your body. All right. And the kingdom, the castle is your body. And the kingdom is defended by your army and your navy. So your army is your nervous system and your navy is your immune system. So they are defending the kingdom. And there are various invading armies that come in every now and then. So those are viruses, bacteria, toxins. And your army and navy are normally easily able to defeat those incoming invaders. But now imagine there's a drought in the kingdom. And I'm sure you find in clinical practice, Jill, that often patients who come with chronic illness, in the preceding year or 2 years, they've often been through some kind of chronic physical stress, emotional stress, a barrage of infections, whatever it may be. So that's the idea of there's a drought in the kingdom. And so now the army and navy are weaker, the kingdom is weaker, but in comes an invading army. And that invading army could be COVID, it could be flu, it could be pain, it could be mold, it could be Lyme. Yeah. And now the army and navy, they have to work doubly hard to fight off that invader because they're weaker. And in their process of fighting off those invaders, they become traumatized. And think of trauma in the psychological sense. But imagine if your brain actually gets traumatized in response to responding to a physical threat internally. Mm-hmm. And suddenly those army and navy generals, they think, I don't know if I fought off the COVID. I don't know if I fought off this pain. Let's keep going. Let's keep defending the kingdom because we never know what the situation may be. So they keep firing off their weapons of war, defending the kingdom. And they think, what happens if the invader is hiding in the forest or hiding in the mountains? Mm-hmm. And so the body continues to initiate this response. But some of those arrows and cannonballs start falling back into the kingdom. And that's where we get autoimmune condition, inflammatory responses in the body. And then the system itself can't detox because the people who clean out all the rubbish from the kingdom, they're all now fighting. So now the kingdom can't detoxify. And therefore you've got a buildup of all these toxins in the body, heavy metals, mycotoxins, etc., which makes the body feel even weaker. And now the army and navy think, oh no, the kingdom's getting weaker. We must fire off even more arrows, even more cannonballs. And the whole system gets into this always dystopian state of dysregulation, overstimulation. The gut now responds, and now the gut's getting inflamed, the gut's getting tight, the balance of good and bad bacteria starts shifting. We get SIBO, we get IBS, and now the whole system is in this altered state. Yeah. And sometimes even when we relax, it doesn't necessarily shift or impact because the system is now in this protective state. And when you have your weekly meeting with your generals, so your Army and Navy generals come to the meeting with Queen Jill, and they say to Queen Jill, we need all the resources. We need the metal, the corn, the wheat. Everything should be channeled to the Army and Navy because we're in survival mode. You think, sure, go ahead. But brain retraining is the next time those Army generals come to their meeting, you say to them, my dear generals, you've done a wonderful job at defending the kingdom, but the war is over.
Yeah.
You can stand down.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time you say it, they won't believe you. The second time you say it, they won't believe you. But the power of neuroplasticity is in the depth and the power of that repetition. And so the more you tell the brain, we are safe, we aren't in danger, we are not under threat, in the unique ways that we have in brain retraining, the more the brain eventually gets the message and the immune system and nervous system responses calm down, the body comes back to balance and health returns. And so in a nutshell, that's what causes these conditions in our humble view. And then this is the route out of them.
So beautiful, your description. I love that. And I know people can so relate. And it's so interesting because I've told the story a little bit about my own aha, similar to yours in a much smaller scale because it was just me. But after my cancer and Crohn's at 25, 26, I realized obviously Th1 was upregulated, my army, my general, everything was fighting, right? And even you think about the terminology fight cancer, like that's what we talk about, right? It's a fight. And I realized that about 10 years after, I was doing fine. I was in remission from Crohn's and cancer, all that was gone. But all of a sudden, I got really sick from mold-related illness. And in the midst of that, what I realized was exactly what you just said was that my Army and Navy and immune system were overreacting to this mold threat. And that overreaction was literally killing me. It was the cytokine storm and the innate immune system's reaction, which we could call the Army and Navy. I love that analogy. And it was one day I realized, wait, I've got to reprogram because right now my body is fighting so hard, it's going to kill me. It thinks this mold is a threat. And yeah, it's a threat, but I knew, I could know here, but my body didn't know. And you know what I did?
Mm.
I thought I need to imagine something to change this program. And I imagined the little minions, the yellow guys from Despicable Me. And I was
Oh, yeah.
imagining them as my immune system. And instead of being like angry fighters, they were happy whistling and they were escorting the mold out, but they were doing it in a way that was not threatening. And
Mm.
that day I started meditating on minions as my immune system to change the program and to create a safe environment that I didn't need to fight the mold. I didn't need to, I had fought cancer, I had fought Crohn's, I had done all that work, and I had to change the programming. And on that day, I created kind of a mantra too. And it was every day in every way, I'm stronger and healthier, wealthier, more resilient, younger, and more beautiful. I will overcome all obstacles. I will outlast all adversity. And what you mentioned is repetition. And I over and over and over and over meditated on minions and repetition with the mantra, and it totally shifted, right? It's
Mm.
the same thing you're saying, only you have a real way to be able to teach it. So how in this program what kind of experience would people have if they are listening and they're like, Dr. Jill and Ashok, I need that kind of help. I need to reprogram. I can feel that in my body. What would your
Mm.
program take them through? Like, how would that look to actually do the work of reprogramming?
Sure. So we have an app, which obviously makes it a lot easier because it's in your pocket 24 hours a day. And essentially, the way the app works is there are 15 interactive video sessions where I take patients through step by step the brain retraining. And there are three R's to the program. The first R is regulating the nervous system. And as you say, that's such an important component because when our brain is overstimulated, it's not so neuroplastic. It's very fixed because it's in danger mode. So we need to regulate the nervous system as a preparation. That's our first step. The second step, which is the unique part, is the retraining of the brain. And that's where we have unique, different brain exercises, tools that train the brain that we are no longer in danger. And these is a 7-step process that we've spent years and years and years refining. And this 7-step process takes people through what to do when they recognize these subtle signals. So we aren't normally aware of our immune system. Our immune system is, it's automatic. It does what it needs to do. But we have now figured out ways you can tune into what your immune system is doing and on the periphery of consciousness and be able to retrain and reprogram it, change the way it responds. And people might say, well, that sounds, how can you do that? Our body is constantly responding to the signals that we give it, actually. We just aren't aware of that connection. And so those are the types of tools. And the third R of the program is what we call re-engaging with joy. And this means that we don't want to just get people well, we want people to stay well.
Yeah.
And that's where understanding your stress triggers, understanding something we call parts. So we use something called parts coaching, understanding how you can keep your nervous system calm for the rest of your life so that you don't get flare-ups going forward. And that's an important part of the long-term recovery that people have. And so with those three R's, we take people through the tools and techniques and they integrate them into their day. And a couple of game changers have been, first of all, obviously having an app, which makes it super easy to follow. Secondly, something called daily Gupta size. Yeah. Now, what these are, daily Zoom calls. Yeah, daily Gupta size. These are daily Zoom calls with our clinicians where we take our patients through the nervous system regulation and the brain retraining live on Zoom every day, Monday to Friday. And that has been a game changer because we know what it's like when people have chronic illness. You know, you're at home, you're by yourself, you're demotivated, someone's asking you to follow a program. Fine, if you can't follow our program, just come on the Zoom calls every day. We take you through what you need, and people are healing even faster than they ever did before because they've got that regularity. They've got that sense of community. And of course, if you want to get a bit woo-woo, the collective intention of 200 to 300 people a day healing together, having that joint intention, that is unexplainable. And that has been the game changer for many people in their healing. And finally, we also have a 90-day program in the sense that now, before brain retraining may have felt a little complex. Once again, you've got to rely on your own instincts. But now we've made it a 90-day program. Day one, here's your bite-sized chunks to do today.
Yeah.
Day two, here's your bite-sized chunks. And for people with brain fog or fatigue, this now becomes a simple, easy way to consume a program in a step-by-step way.
Oh, I love that because as we so know, biggest indicator of mortality, like more than smoking and obesity, is loneliness, right? And disconnection.
Mm.
So what you've done in this program is bring something that's kind of subtle, but actually so powerful, and that's this community sense. That is phenomenal. I didn't even know about that as part of the program. Because just that alone, that knowing that you're not alone in your suffering and knowing there's somebody else out there to be there with you, so, so, so powerful. I love that you've done that. My next question you might have just answered, but it was how long could people expect till they actually see a transition? You mentioned like 90 days. Is that kind of the minimum effective dose we could say to get people
It
in?
is. It is, yes. We say to people, if a doctor said, right, take this for 3 months or 6 months, and then you'll see the results, you would do it. So in a similar way, we don't want people to become complacent because some people notice effects within days and weeks,
Mhm.
but we want people to have long-term healing. So we say minimum 90 days, ideally 6 months.
Yeah.
But people, that might be too long for people. But so a minimum of 90 days that you will see either an improvement, or even some people see full recovery, or what we call a full recovery, 80% recovery. But just keep going. And if you see that improvement or an 80% recovery within 3 months, keep going, because it's so easy to become complacent and rush back into the stress of the world. But really, your nervous system needs that continual support for many, many months. And that's why we have a 1 year subscription so people can continue with it. But yeah, people see results during those periods of time. And if they don't, there'll be the odd patient where it has been 4 or 5 months before they see an improvement. And they're really glad that they kept going and kept up the commitment.
No, I love that because time and consistency are the things that really make change, right? And as you also know, when we actually take on a new identity, which you probably address as far as who we are, how does illness affect, am I my illness? Am I not my illness? All those things actually matter. So I bet that really, really does, because those habits and identities, they also, if you say you were to try a new exercise program, right, it'd be about 90 days till you really get it as a habit. Maybe 30, you'd see some significant difference, which is what you said as well. But then like repetition and time are key. Now, you mentioned something that made me think about a lot of my patients. I have them all range of the spectrum and all different illnesses, definitely more of the complex chronic illness. And two thoughts here. Number one, if you're a physician listening out there, which I know we have a lot of physicians and providers that listen to our show, this is something that I feel is an absolute key as a referral. So just like you refer to physical therapy or whatever else, I use the Gupta program and similar methodologies for patients pretty much across the board because I feel like it's so crucial. Like you mentioned in that lecture, I've realized in the last several years that this is a key missing component, even in functional medicine in most of our practices. So I just want to speak to the providers for a moment and say, if you're not referring to some sort of neuroplasticity training, and this one is a very proven, well done. I have the highest respect for what you've done. It should be part of your treatment plan. Absolutely. And it's easy because you just give the website, then they hook up with you and they go. Or the app, right? It's not too
Yeah.
difficult. My other thought was, though, as I'm thinking about patients, I have these spectrums. One of them is like they're so unaware of their body, the kind that you kind of mentioned, that they don't even notice when they have heartburn if they're stressed, or they have, stomach ache or chest pain, and all these things are physical symptoms. And again, I know you go into more deeply to how to tell if your immune system is overregulated, and you probably go into real specifics. So we have one side, people who are very unaware, and it sounds like in the program you're really teaching them to become aware of their somatic sensations, and how does that play into what they're seeing in their actual illness or wellness or their symptoms. But on the other side, I have a subset of patients. These patients will come, maybe a 10-page document before the visit with an outline of bulleted maybe 100 points of their symptoms in detail by day. Or they might give me a Google spreadsheet that's like 30 pages of day by day. Now, it's great because I actually, and wherever patients are, there's zero judgment here about who they are and what they're doing, because sometimes those are super helpful to have a diary of symptoms. But on that side, these maybe 5% of patients, they're over identified with their somatic symptoms, right? What would you
Mm.
do with this patient? Because part of it is someone who is so unaware of their body, their somatic symptoms. Can you frame that for kind of both sides and how your program might look at that? Because it's one thing to be more in touch with your body and understand what's happening and then try to switch it. But what about those people who are over-identified with their symptoms and they can't get out of that loop, almost like an OCD type of, does that make sense?
Of course, and our program addresses both ends of that spectrum. So when it comes to the people who are, say, hypervigilant,
Yeah. Yes.
or they are really aware, they're getting constant signaling about what's going on in the body, that is addressed by our brain retraining. And that's actually one of the core methodologies is to help people understand that. And the flip side is the people who are unaware, completely, just going through life, not pacing themselves. We talk about the importance of pacing and also the importance of somatic work. So within our program, we have what we call somatic retraining, which is helping people become more aware of these symptoms in their body, but in a way that trains the brain that we are safe
Mhm.
versus this underlying unconscious resistance. So what happens is even if people aren't hypervigilant on their symptoms, actually their unconscious brain is, and it's
Yeah.
detecting all this tension and tightness and continually creating that immune and nervous system response like an automatic loop. And we need to bring the power of consciousness into that loop to be able to interrupt it and retrain. So each of our patients is very different along that spectrum, but the actual solutions are very similar, which is we want to have a natural connection with our body, but not a hypervigilance.
Yeah.
And it's that middle ground.
Oh, you've really stated that well, because the hypervigilance is usually the issue. And like you said, some people are so traumatized and hypervigilant that they become dissociated, right? And they're really still hypervigilant, or their brain is, but they're just like they've tuned out because it's too much for them to handle. So I like that you've said that. So even those of you out listening out there, like, well, I don't even know when I don't feel well. You're probably either dissociated, or there still could be, if you do have an illness, there might still be a sense of hypervigilance. Um,
And I just want a really important point here is actually related to trauma.
yeah.
So we noticed that a lot of our patients, not all, but a lot have a background of trauma, small t or big T. And that actually relates to how we relate to our bodies. So if we have had past trauma, we may, as you say, become hypervigilant, over anxious about our bodies, but it can go the other way where we have dissociated. As a child, we learn to dissociate from our emotions and our physical sensations because that was the safe thing for the brain to do, to repress it. And that then continues as an adult, but then in that way, we can't pace, we can't connect to what's going on, we can't connect to the healing. So there are stuck emotions in the center of the body that need that inner awareness. And so trauma can push people on either end.
Yeah, I know my own experience. I think even just medical training and, being an oldest girl in a kind of a tough farm family background with buck up and be tough and don't show weakness or whatever, that kind of mentality, which has made me really strong. But realizing that in my 40s, I had to really go back and actually not dissociate so easily, because I think, and
Mhm.
even if you're a doctor listening, I just want to speak to you, because I think my medical training, at least 20 years ago when I was in medical school, it's pretty brutal, and it's almost impossible to get through that training without somehow dissociating to some degree. And it's actually
Mhm.
encouraged. because too much empathy, too much connection, it actually is sadly discouraged. And so I think a lot of clinicians that are now in this world of integrative functional medicine, one of the reasons I gave that lecture to our colleagues was like, how do we really get back in our empathetic connection? Because the only way we can heal someone is actually to connect and for us to actually start to create that safety for them. What would you talk to? So doctors like me, you have this program mostly for patients and that, but how would you talk to doctors as far as how could we help facilitate a patient's healing as they're going through the program? Like, how could we show up in the office in a way that is helpful to their own healing?
Yeah, so the good news is we have a lot of experience because we have thousands of clinicians around the world who are recommending the program. And so naturopaths, nutritionists, functional and integrative doctors, thousands. And we give lots of resources to those clinicians to support their patients. So there's like a two-pager they can give to their patient to say, this is an overall outline of what the program is. Or they can encourage their client to have a look at our website, join the free trial, which doesn't involve a credit card. So then the patient can look through some of the videos and see if they connect with this type of program. So there's lots of great videos and audios that are free that people can use. And we even have a concierge service where clinicians can actually incorporate this type of approach into their own practice so that it's part of their brand, part of their treatment protocol. So there's lots of different ways they can interface with this. And most importantly for clinicians, we give free access to any practicing clinicians. So you can until you've had that personal experience, it's very difficult to sometimes recommend. So we encourage clinicians to find something they want to shift within themselves. And they can use the program and they can get a feel for it. And then it's so much easier to then explain it to their patients.
Oh, that makes so much sense because most of my in-depth medical learning has been through some sort of experience, just like you in the beginning of going through that illness. Um, what kind of patients do you find? I mean, clearly we've outlined all this, and like I said, I think 100% of the people the kind of patients that I see would be benefit. But if someone's out there saying, "Is this program for me?" What would be like your ideal client, the people who benefit most? What kinds of illnesses? What kinds of symptoms? What would that look like?
Yeah, so I think the first area is what we call neuroimmune conditions. So that would be your long COVID, your fibromyalgia, your ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's one particular area where we definitely get really good results. Another area is complex pain. So where people have pain and they've tried so many different avenues, they've got chronic pain. This works for chronic pain as well. So that includes fibromyalgia. Then a third area are what we call sensitivity reactions or environmental reactions. That's your mold, your Lyme, your chemical sensitivities, electrical sensitivities. This works for that kind of area. And then finally, a new area we're investigating is autoimmune conditions like MS and Alzheimer's. We're initially seeing anecdotal reports and we're now doing studies in that field, which I think is very exciting. And then the type of patient, I mean, as you say, anyone suffering from those types of conditions can benefit. But in terms of whether someone feels ready to take something on like this, I think, first of all, there's a shift in being able to start with a blank piece of paper. So if a person has the mindset, well, I'm waiting for the doctor to find a pill for me, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do some research and figure this out based on a pill, then it's a shift of awareness here to say, actually, we call these software problems, not hardware problems. So that means until we rewire the software, the hardware is going to keep malfunctioning. So it's shifting the mindset to let me be open to something new and different and not be skeptical about it. Because if you're skeptical and I mean, we're all skeptical, but if we are over skeptical, then we're just going to block ourselves from being open to something new. So I think that's the type of patient. And we really want to give that hope to everybody that we believe that the vast majority of patients from our studies that we've done can heal from your condition, no matter what your doctor, no matter what your support group has said, healing is possible and that is your birthright.
Oh, love that. And I love that. There's nothing I love more than giving hope because the truth is I'm kind of a miracle myself healing from cancer and Crohn's and all that. And I know that experience. And same with you, right? You've been the same way. So, um, any last bit of advice or wisdom or anything we didn't cover that you think would be important for people who are interested in learning more?
Sure. I think the most important thing is when it comes down to belief. Of course, you can go onto Instagram and there's 1,001 influencers talking about, oh, we've got this program for this program for this. But what matters is the scientific rigor behind it. So we are very medical study focused. And we've now done 6 medical studies, 4 randomized controlled trials and 2 clinical audits. And all of them have shown very, very promising results, very, very good results. So I think I just love to share, some of those results. So we did an independent, a university did an independent study on fibromyalgia, and they compared our program to a relaxation and wellness program. And they found that just after 8 weeks of intervention, in the Gupta program group, the fibromyalgia scores went down by 40% just in 8 weeks, but 0% in the control group. And we had a halving of pain, a halving of anxiety, halving of depression, and a doubling of functional capacity, or 50% improvement in functional capacity just after 8 weeks. And we're a 6-month program. So people can read that published study. Long COVID, we did a study on long COVID comparing our program to a wellness program. So that wellness program had diet, supplements, sleep, all the good things we might give. And after 3 months, the Gupta program was 4 times more effective at reducing fatigue and exhaustion compared to the control group. And many of those patients got back to a full recovery. So that's a published study on long COVID. And then we did a clinical audit recently on 16 different conditions. And we found that our program was effective for 14 of those conditions in terms of significance. And that was long COVID, Lyme, mold, anything between 50, 60, 70% improvement after 3 months, up to 100% improvement after 3 months. Long COVID was 84% improvement. So the more and more data that we collect and more independent studies we do, the more that patients can feel like, wow, there's such this body of evidence. This isn't something I need to believe in now. This is like taking something that I might take, traditionally. And also we want to engage with the medical profession to say this isn't now something on the fringe or something that is woo-woo. This is now becoming a mainstream idea. And I hope that in 5 or 10 years' time, when you go to your doctor with one of these chronic conditions, brain retraining combined with supplements and lifestyle and diet changes will be the first thing that people get versus the last thing they get.
I love that. And I'm so glad you brought the science here. And I'm so glad that you're committed to studying it and putting yourself out there because a program like that, it could go either way, right? When you put an independent study. So I'm really, really admire you for that. And it's interesting because when I talk to physicians about order of operations with mast cell and Lyme and mold and all these things, I always am limbic retraining or brain retraining is at the top. It has to be. And it can start even before, just like you said. So if you're a clinician listening out there, if you're a patient who's looking for a functional doctor or not knowing what to do, this is a great starting place. And I love that you
Yes.
mentioned that because in my mind too, long-term functional medicine would start with the brain retraining. It's just like core. It's so core.
Exactly. And the sum is greater than the parts. So sometimes clinicians feel, well, let's do the work that we traditionally do first, and then we'll bring this other piece later if what we've done hasn't worked. And what we find works the best is when you combine both of them, because what then happens is a multiplier effect as people have the good nutrition, the nutrients that they need, combined with the brain now calming down, they work together. That is the true vision of integrative
Right.
medicine, which is why we all came into this arena. And it works really well. And then clinicians come to us and say, we're getting much better outcomes when we introduce this piece, sometimes 3 to 4 times better outcomes, according to our studies. And so I really want to work in partnership with clinicians to say, this is this complementary piece that can, everyone comes out of it much better when we incorporate this.
Amazing. Well, I'm so grateful for all of your hard work for many decades in this world and just putting together a very successful and effective program because it helps all of us that are out there practicing, doing our little thing. Where can people, if they want to find more, of course, if you're listening, driving, don't take notes. This will all be in the show notes, but where can people find more information about the program?
Sure. Well, we'd love for people to come and take our 30-day free trial. They can sample loads of videos, audios. So they can go to our website, which is guptaprogram.com. So Gupta, guptaprogram.com. And there they can sign up. Or you can just go to the App Store or Play Store, type in Gupta Program Brain Retraining, download the free app. And once again, start retraining your brain straight away. There's lots of free stuff on there. And I think we would love for people to at least take that first step, see how they feel. And for the moment, that first part of daily Gupta size, the nervous system regulation, we're offering it free to the world.
Wow.
So the first, every day you're getting a brand new clinician taking through a brand new exercise. And that's something that people can join and start regulating their nervous system straight away.
That's amazing. I wonder how many people have even done that and then, obviously got into the program, but had benefit with just all the free stuff you're offering. That's amazing. Well, thank you again for the work that you're doing in the world. Thanks for coming on today. I think this information is really important. I remember at PLMI, we were talking, I'm like, we got to get you on here so that we can share the brain retraining and the importance of that. So just thanks again for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me for this episode of Resiliency Radio. I hope you got some great, insightful information and inspiration from Ashok Gupta. He has a great program with the Gupta Program. There's also multiple different brain retraining things out there nowadays. So I would love to hear from you. If you have had experience with brain retraining, what have you liked? What program have you liked? I'm always learning things from all of you who are listening, all of my patients and clients. And would love to know if you've had experience with the Gupta program or any other brain retraining. I want to hear from you. So please comment below. Tell me what you found to be helpful. And we will see you next week on a new episode of Resiliency Radio. Take care.